By the time I found the pantyhose in his gym bag, I'd already decided my husband was cheating on me. They were folded, which somehow felt worse. Not crumpled like a mistake, but carefully tucked between his old college t-shirt and a towel. Sheer nude, the kind my grandmother wore to church every Easter. I remember just staring at them, my brain stuttering. The bag smelled like detergent and Mark's deodorant and the faint rubbery scent of the gym floor, and there, nestled in all that familiarity, was this foreign object. My first thought was simple and brutal. Another woman. There was no universe in which those pantyhose were mine. I'm a 35-year-old graphic designer who lives in black jeans and sneakers and thinks tights are already a lot of effort, thanks. I don't own anything that delicate. I held them up by the waistband, like evidence in a crime drama. This whispery, beige nothingness dangling from my fingers, and thought, this is it. This is the thing that blows up our life. Hey, babe, you seen my... I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mark was in the doorway, still in his work polo, tie loosened, hair messed up from running his fingers through it. He froze when he saw what I was holding. For a second we were both completely silent, the pantyhose swaying gently in the air between us like some horrible, flimsy pendulum. "Oh," he said. That was it. Just "oh," like I'd caught him leaving dishes in the sink, not "this." "They're not," I started, and then realized I had no idea how to finish that sentence. "Who do these belong to, Mark?" His face did something complicated, muscles rearranging in a way I'd never seen before. Shame, panic, something like resignation. He shut the bedroom door slowly, like he was stalling for time. "They're mine," he said. It was not the answer I was expecting. My brain, which had been spinning up images of some mystery woman, screeched and changed tracks with an almost audible grinding sound. "What?" I laughed, because that seemed like the only possible reaction. "Very funny. I'm serious." "I am too." His voice was quiet, steady, in that way he gets when he's trying very hard not to lose it. "They're mine." I looked at him, then at the pantyhose, then back at him. Mark is solid. That's the word I always used to describe him. 38, broad shoulders, dark hair that's just starting to gray at the temples, hands that know how to fix everything from leaky faucets to broken toy trucks. He's the guy who built our dining table from scratch and still carries all the groceries in one trip just to prove he can. In the 10 years we'd been married, I had never once imagined him buying pantyhose. "For what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. He swallowed. "To wear." The floor might as well have opened up under me. I'd always considered myself pretty open-minded, at least in theory. I have queer friends. I sign petitions. I like to think I'm not one of those people who freak out when things deviate from the Hallmark movie script. But this was my husband, my marriage, my life. And suddenly there was this secret in the middle of our bedroom, and it was wearing beige hose in my imagination, and I didn't know what that meant about us. "For, like, under your clothes?" I asked, hearing the edge of hysteria creep in. "Yeah." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "Sometimes." "How long?" I gripped the waistband so tight my knuckles went white. "How long has this been a thing?" He winced. "Since before you? Before college. A long time." I sat down on the bed because my knees were starting to feel like jelly. The mattress dipped under me. The pantyhose pooled in my lap like spilled champagne. "And you didn't tell me," I said. It came out flatter than I expected. Less accusation, more fact. He sat down on the edge of the dresser, hands clasped between his knees. I was ashamed, Em. I thought I could just not. That if I married you and we had our life and everything was good, it would go away, or at least fade into the background. Guess it didn't. Guess it didn't, he agreed softly. Anger flared then, hot and bright and easier to feel than anything else. Did you wear them when we... I choked on the rest of the sentence, horrified at the way my mind was filling in the blanks. Sometimes, he said, eyes dropping. Under my pants. Not every time. I never wanted you to feel weird. It makes me feel good, safe. I like how it feels on my skin. I know it's weird. It's not weird, I snapped automatically, then realized I didn't actually know if I believed that yet. It's just, you lied about it. You let me think I knew you and I didn't. He didn't argue. He just sat there looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, shoulders rounded like he was bracing for a punch. I wish I could tell you I handled it with grace, that I tapped into all my theoretical open-mindedness and sat down and listened, and we held hands and had a mature conversation about desires and shame. Instead, I threw the pantyhose onto the floor like they'd burned me and said, "I need you to sleep on the couch tonight." "Okay," he said immediately. No protest, no pleading. That almost made me angrier somehow, like he'd already rehearsed this moment in his head and knew his lines. When he was gone, I locked the bedroom door, now something I'd never done before in our marriage, and lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, my heart punching at my ribs. Somewhere in the living room, I heard the couch creak and the rustle of a blanket. Our cat, Olive, scratched at the door and meowed, confused by this new arrangement. I didn't sleep much. The next day, after he went to work and I told my boss I was under the weather, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and Googled husband pantyhose fetish. The results were a lot. Forums, blog posts, anonymous confessions, terms I'd never heard before. Men posting photos of themselves in silky stockings, faces cropped out, wives swapping stories about finding hidden drawers of lingerie, some encouraging each other to dump a pervert, others talking about how they'd made peace with it. Reading through it all, my emotions scrambled. On one hand, there was relief. This wasn't some one-person freak show. There was vocabulary for it, whole communities. On the other hand, there was this wash of grief I couldn't quite name. All these people talking openly to strangers about something my husband hadn't trusted me enough to tell me. I kept circling back to that. It hurt more than the pantyhose themselves. That night he made us spaghetti for dinner like he always did on Tuesdays. His, "I swear I'm not ordering takeout again" meal. We moved around each other in the kitchen carefully, like dancers who'd forgotten the steps. At the table, the clink of forks was deafening. Finally, I put my fork down. "Why didn't you tell me before we got married?" I asked. "Like when we were in that whole no secrets phase?" He looked up, sauce smeared on his knuckle. "Because that phase has an asterisk," he said quietly. "No secrets that are socially acceptable, no secrets I'm not scared will make you leave. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be." He sighed. "I grew up in a house where my dad called any guy who wasn't a carbon copy of him a sissy. I tried on my mom's tights when I was 12 and thought I was going to hell. You don't just undo that because you fall in love with someone." I thought about his father, big and loud and opinionated, who still made jokes about real men over Thanksgiving turkey. Suddenly I could picture teenage Mark, alone in his room, heart pounding as he slid nylon up his legs, terrified someone would walk in. Shame layered over longing, layered over terror, my anger softened by a fraction. "I'm not your dad," I said, my voice catching. "I know," he said. "That's exactly why I was afraid." We went in circles for weeks. Some nights we talked, raw and halting, pulling at the knot between us. Other nights we avoided each other, orbiting the same rooms without touching, both of us brittle from the effort of being gentle. One Saturday, my sister called and asked if everything was okay because you sounded weird over text. I stared out the window at our perfectly normal street, kids on scooters, a dog walker, a neighbor mowing his lawn, and said, "Yeah, fine, just busy." I hung up and felt something inside me crack. I found a therapist first, a woman named Nadia, who did a lot of work with couples and sexuality, and had a website that didn't make me want to run away. I sat in her cozy office with the potted plants and the abstract art and blurted out, "My husband likes pantyhose, and I don't know if that means I married a stranger." She didn't laugh. She didn't flinch. She nodded and said, "Tell me more." I told her about finding them, about the gym bag, the late-night Googling, the way my stomach flipped every time I opened a drawer now, half expecting more surprises. I told her about thinking he was cheating and almost wishing he had been, because at least that was a script I understood. When I'd run out of words, she said, "It sounds like the betrayal for you isn't the fetish itself so much as the secrecy around it." The word fetish made me bristle, but she said it without judgment, almost clinically. I nodded, throat tight. "We'll need to bring him in," she said, "if he's willing. But for you, right now, I want you to sit with this question. If he had told you when you were dating, and it had been framed as just one part of a whole person you loved, how do you think you would have felt?" I knew the answer immediately, and I hated it. I would have been weirded out, sure. We would have had some awkward conversations, but if 28-year-old me, already half in love with his stupid grin and his kindness, had been given a choice up front, I probably would have said, "Okay, let's figure it out together." Realizing that made me feel both powerful and deeply sad. There was a version of us that could have existed without this particular rupture. We hadn't gotten to be them. Mark came to therapy the next week. He sat on the edge of the couch like he was waiting for a verdict, hands clasped so tight I could see the tendons in his wrists. "I don't want to lose my wife over nylon," he said at one point, voice cracking. "I'll stop. I already threw them out. I'll never wear them again if that's what it takes." Something in me recoiled. The finality of it, the way he was willing to carve off a part of himself and bury it, felt familiar. I'd seen that look on him before when he talked about his dad, about biting his tongue at family dinners. Nadia tilted her head. "You can promise not to act on something, Mark," she said gently. "You can't promise not to feel it. Trying to cut this off completely may just increase the shame that kept you from sharing it in the first place." "So what, she has to just accept it?" he blurted. "That's not fair to her." "Maybe the question isn't accept or reject," she said. "Maybe it's how transparent can we be, and what boundaries will make both of you feel safe." The idea of boundaries around Pantyhose would have made me laugh a month ago. Now it felt like a lifeline. At home that night, after too much takeout and some ugly crying in separate rooms, we sat on the couch, Olive wedged stubbornly between us like a furry peacekeeper. "I don't want you to throw parts of yourself away from me," I said, picking at a loose thread on a cushion. "But I also don't want this to become the only thing that matters when we're close." He nodded slowly. "It's not the only thing," he said. "It's just the thing I've never let anyone see, so it feels huge, like radioactively huge." "What if we shrink it?" I suggested. "Make it not the thing we never mention and not the main event, just one ingredient." He laughed a little brokenly. "You and your metaphors." We talked for hours. We came up with rules, trying them on like outfits. No surprises. If he wanted to wear them, he'd ask. No sneaking. They'd stay in a specific drawer, not stashed in gym bags or the garage or the trunk of his car. We'd check in afterward, actually talk about how it felt, instead of pretending nothing was different. Most importantly, we agreed. There had to be intimacy without them too. Nights where it was just us, skin to skin, no nylon involved, to remind me that I wasn't interchangeable with a piece of clothing. It was clumsy and awkward, and not remotely sexy, sitting there negotiating nylon clauses like lawyers. But it was also the most honest conversation we'd had in years. Our first pantyhose night, as we jokingly called it afterward, was barely anything by internet standards. Definitely not the stuff of the racier forums I'd stumbled into. I stood in our bedroom, heart racing, wearing a simple black dress and the sheer stockings we'd picked out together at Target like we were shopping for cereal. I'd never paid that much attention to my legs before. They were just the things that carried me around. But in the mirror, encased in that slight shine, they looked different. Not like the glossy, airbrushed magazine legs, but like mine, slightly more intentional. I felt silly and self-conscious and strangely powerful all at once. Mark knocked on the door like a teenager coming to pick me up for prom. When I opened it, he actually lost his words for a second. "You look," he said, trailing off. "If you say, like my mom, I'm filing for divorce," I joked weakly. He laughed, the tension in the room thinning. "I was going to say beautiful," he said. "And yeah, hot, but mostly I feel seen, like you walked into this weird little corner of my brain, and instead of running away, you sat down. We didn't do anything wild. We just curled up on the bed and kissed, his hand tracing slow circles on my thigh, fingers sometimes skimming over the nylon like he couldn't believe it was really there. I paid attention to his breathing, the way his shoulders relaxed, the way he kept meeting my eyes like he was checking to make sure I was still there, still with him. To my surprise, I kind of liked the sensation too, the glide, the gentle compression, the way his calloused fingertips felt through the fabric. I hadn't expected that. I'd expected to feel like a prop. Instead, I felt chosen, not because of the pantyhose, but because he'd trusted me enough to let me join him there. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my legs beginning to itch a little, my dress rucked up around my hips in a thoroughly unglamorous way. He looked at me as if I'd hung the moon. "Thank you," he murmured into my hair. "It's still weird," I confessed, because I'd promised myself I wouldn't fake it. "But it's our weird." "Yeah," he said, smiling softly. "Our weird." Over time, something shifted. The pantyhose stopped being this looming threat hovering over our marriage and became a thing we did sometimes, like how he loves camping and I tolerate it once a year because I love him, or how I drag him to art museums even though he thinks anything without a Viking or a spaceship is boring, and because we'd ripped off the Band-Aid with the scariest secret, other ones started to follow. One night, months later, we were lying in bed, feet tangled under the comforter. The cat sprawled at our feet like a furry dictator, and he said, "Is there anything you've never told me?" You know, in that category. I hesitated. There were things, little flickers of curiosity I'd filed away as too much or too odd, fantasies about being the one in charge, about being watched, about saying no, and having it actually be heard. Nothing wild, nothing dangerous, just mine. I thought about teenage me, sneaking my mom's steamy novels and skipping to the scenes where the heroine actually asked for what she wanted, even if it was cheesy. I thought about how ashamed Mark had been, how small he'd looked on that dresser. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "I think about being in control, like fully. Not just the illusion that movies show, with the woman in pretty underwear, but still doing exactly what the guy wants. I mean, actually being heard when I say I want this, not that." He turned onto his side to look at me. "We can do that," he said simply. Just like that. No teasing, no whoa, bossy, no jokes about dominatrixes. It was liberating. That conversation never would have happened if we hadn't torn down the first wall. We started having these little check-ins, not just about hosiery nights, but about everything. How did that feel? Did anything feel off? We used words like consent and comfort in the middle of our small, ordinary life, in between grocery lists and PTA meetings and my deadlines and his softball league. It didn't turn us into some hypersexual, boundary-pushing couple. Honestly, most of the time we're still in sweatpants, asleep by 10:30. But the quality of our closeness changed. It felt less like we were performing the roles of husband and wife, and more like we were us, two weird, flawed, soft-bellied humans figuring it out. There are still moments where I catch a glimpse of beige nylon and feel a little jolt, that old instinctive, "this is strange" reaction. There are still days where Mark looks at his dad and then at our son, and I can see the worry flicker across his face. What gets passed down? What gets hidden? But now when that happens, we talk about it. We name it. We don't stuff it in a gym bag and hope no one finds it. The pantyhose didn't ruin us. They could have. The secrecy around them almost did. But once they were out in the open, literally and metaphorically, they forced us to become braver, more honest, more tender with each other. I used to think a good marriage meant never having to have conversations that made you squirm. That if someone really loved you, their desires would automatically line up with yours in this neat PG-13 way. Now I think a good marriage might just be two people continually choosing to show each other the weird, unflattering, vulnerable parts. And stay. Our story could have ended the day I opened that gym bag. Instead, it took a very odd, very silky detour straight into the heart of who we are. And if you'd told me back then that one day I'd be standing in Target, tossing a multi-pack of pantyhose into our cart while my husband waggled his eyebrows at me and our kid begged for dinosaur fruit snacks, feeling more in love than ever, I would have thought you were out of your mind. Turns out, sometimes the thing you're sure will tear you apart becomes the very thing that stitches you closer together, one sheer ridiculous thread at a time.